but I was just like, Brad can't know I've got a boyfriend because he might actually ruin this, like, too protective. And so I remember I snuck Cal over to Mum's house because at the time I was still living at home with Mum. Brad was living with Dad. And Mum knew that we were dating and stuff, but I was like, just don't tell Brad until we're ready to tell Brad.
And so it was a Sunday, and I was I
was mortified.
Like, love Mum to bits. And because I haven't lived with Mum for ages, like, but Mum and I are super close, so we talk on the phone like 3 times a day. We catch up. It's like not a week that goes by where we don't catch up in person. And I was like, I'm going to surprise Mum for a coffee because I hadn't seen her that week. And so I'll drive over to her house and like call her just when I'm down the road and say, hey, I'm about to rock up for a coffee. And I was like, I knew she'd be stoked. And
I was not stoked.
And I'm driving up the street and my mum's never not been excited to see me. But when I called Mum and she's like, hey, darling, how are you? And I'm like, yeah, good. I'm like, hey, just at the bottom of the street. I'll be there in a minute for a coffee. Put the kettle on. Mum's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, oh, nothing. And I'm like, Mum, you've never not been excited to see me. What the fuck is wrong? And she's like...
It was at this moment I get a text from Mum.
Yeah, and Mum's like, oh, Shania's got a friend here. And I'm like, oh, yeah, nice. And she's like, oh, it's a friend that's a boy. And I'm like, is it a friend that's a boy or is it a boyfriend?
Mum's
and
got my
she's
back.
like, and Mum's like, oh, they've been seeing each other for a little while. And I'm like, who the fuck is it? And Mum goes... his name's Cal. You wouldn't know him. Mum goes, don't make a scene. Don't come here and make a scene. And I'm like, Mum, what's his last name? And then I call Dad straight away. I'm like, Dad, get on Facebook. Because then I'm driving. Dad's like, who is it? And I'm like, Cal McLennan. Dad's searching on Facebook and Dad's like, can't find anything. And I'm like, Dad wouldn't be able to anyways because he's a fucking tech idiot.
Cal has he's the worst with social media. He's just not a social media person.
Zero social presence. And like jumps on it and jumps off it. Yeah. But he... And I rock up and I'm just thinking, I don't know why, right? But in my head, I just thought Cal. I'm like just thinking some surfy guy. Skinny little surfer. Like loves a couple beers with the boys, bit of a larrikin. Probably walk through the door and he goes, you, what's going on? Or something like that. And I remember walking inside and I'm like looking around. Can't see anyone. I walk into the kitchen and Mum's like, Shania's going to bring Cal down in a minute. Now, be nice. She really likes him. They've been seeing each other for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, why don't Dad and I know about this? And she's like, why do you think you and Dad don't know about this? I'm like, fair enough. So they walk down the stairs and Shania sort of walks down first and she's got Cal. She's dragging Cal behind her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy fuck. This guy is 6'4", 100 and something kilos. And literally, I'm just like, what the fuck? So... He comes over. We end up getting on really good. Like, we had a really good laugh. We got on great straight away. But I remember still saying this when I left because he was so big. And I'm like, at the time, I was probably... You've been together for, what, 3 years?
3.5, nearly 4.
Yeah, nearly 4 years. So at the time, I'm like 21. And I'm kind of like a baby face. So I feel like I look like... I kind of look like I'm 16, 17 still. And I go to Sis, yeah, really nice bloke, but when am I getting an invite to his 30th birthday? And Shania's like, you're such a fucking asshole. He's 6 months older than you, you dickhead.
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, well,
he's your big brother.
I'm like, yeah, 6'4", fucking big ass looking motherfucker. And then,
all right, let's not do this because I'm going to hear that from Cal for like the next week.
Yeah.
Whenever he gets a compliment, he uses it against me for like a good 2 months. So,
yeah,
Cal,
fair.
there you go. There's
but
your new one.
we get on amazing now. But yeah, that's fine.